anytime.
All right, everyone. It is another episode of Any War Game Anytime, and it's just me today. Sam and Boz have got stuff. Sam's got trying to hunt down that millionaire so we can do this full time. But until that time, and Boz is in his transition to Australia, so Boz is going to be in and out here and there. But we've got a great guest. It's so good to get him on. I tell you, I was so excited. It's Tom, who is the creator of Moonstone. Tom, how you doing, man?
Hello, good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
We met
yeah,
at UK Games Expo a couple of weeks ago, didn't we?
we did, and we were talking about that. There was a few standouts. I really think that Moonstone was something that just sort of blew us away, as far as just the quality and everything. And it's funny that I even mentioned it before. I'm actually a mass battles guy. I'm a guy who I like big battles. I'm into epic.
Yeah.
And so for me to like Moonstone as a skirmish game for me it's particularly impressive because I'm actually not a big into skirmish games, and it was so cool that I'm actually getting into it. And I want to talk a little bit about it. But before we get into Moonstone, just tell us a little bit about your history into wargaming.
So, funny you mentioned mass battles because obviously I'm British and every young person in Britain, it seems, walks into a Games Workshop store at some stage in their life when they're young and impressionable. So that was my entrance into the hobby. I was very young. My brother was 8 years older than me, and he played games like Epic and Blood Bowl. It was far too cool for me. I was being shooed away every time I'd try and join in.
Yeah.
Probably just moving the buildings around when they're playing Epic or something like that, I imagine. But I played a game called Crossbows and Catapults, if you know that. I was tiny. This is a kid's game. Basically, you build little castles and you have little crossbows and catapults with elastic bands, and you try and knock one another's castle down. Absolutely loved it. And I was trying to buy like an expansion at Toys R Us for this game, and it was sold out. I had like a birthday coming up, and my mum was like, "Oh, why don't we go into that Games Workshop that your brother's interested in?" And I wandered in, and instead of these little plastic castles, little bricks that I was looking for, they had a full scale, you know, imperial castle with orc catapults pointed at it, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing!" So the assistant, the red shirt, was like, "Oh yeah, come along, you can join in this game, and you can be in control of the catapult," because obviously that's all I wanted to do was knock walls down with catapults at that particular point in time. And he was like, "Yeah, you just have to guess the range in inches." I didn't even know what an inch was. I was about 6 years old. Um, Somehow, though, miraculously, even though I don't actually think there's rules in the game, I managed to knock the castle wall down, or at least that's what the man told me, and I was absolutely sold.
Oh
So,
man.
yeah, I walked away with the big box of Warhammer Fantasy Battles and assembled them, and my brother taught me how to play.
Hmm.
He didn't exactly teach me how to play. He just kind of said, "What do you want to do?" And I would do it. And he'd say, "Roll 10 dice or whatever," and I'd roll them. And he'd interpret the dice for me. And mysteriously, I never won a single game. Absolutely trashed me, but I had no clue what was going on. It took probably about an hour and a half just to set up all these tiny little
Yeah.
goblin
Yeah.
soldiers and move them because I didn't have movement trays, painstaking inch by inch towards my brother, and then suddenly I'd roll a load of dice and all the people would be dead. But I just loved although I maybe didn't understand what was going on, I just loved the idea of battles and fantasy and orcs and castles.
You are truly a gamer at heart. If Warhammer Fantasy was and you're still into it after that,
Yeah.
that's a tough game to get into at first. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I think I like the idea of the game a lot more than the game. I ended up with two fully painted armies, all the terrain, everything modelled. It looked gorgeous. Probably played it about 6 times. Was like, I don't know if I
Mhm.
actually enjoy the experience of playing this game that much. I love looking at the pictures and painting the models and imagining playing. Um, but I I'd kind of got into Blood Bowl, and that was a bit more
Oh
of
yeah.
me. Um, and I kind of became active in the Blood Bowl playtesting community when it was dropped by Games Workshop. So I kind of got a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, just a little bit.
Hmm.
And um, and then Malifaux came along. I was kind of out of wargaming, and a friend of mine sent me some pictures on some sort of chat application. I don't know what it was now. But look at these, aren't they cool? I was like, yeah, they're really cool actually. And he kind of dragged me back into the hobby. And I think by that stage, I was probably past mass battle games. I think having painted my two armies, not used them, dedicated years of my life to them, and ultimately just sold them on. I was like, no, I think smaller scales for me. And then I thought it was a good game, and we enjoyed playing it together. And then I thought, oh, skirmish games. That's kind of yeah. I think that's actually what I'm into now.
Hmm.
Got into some of the other ones, dabbled in Bushido and Guild Ball, and a few of the other skirmish games. And yeah, I think it's definitely my favorite genre of game, but it's by no means the only style of game that I enjoy. I still enjoy every kind of game, really.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. It's really good to hear you that getting into Blood Bowl, which I think Blood Bowl is the best Games Workshop game ever created. I mean, it really and it's funny, I can see how Moonstone, now that you're saying it, I can see where you're getting some of those. Like I can almost feel a little Blood Bowl in there almost.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
still love Blood Bowl. The
Yeah.
whole Jim and Bob commentary and the little tongue-in-cheek
Hmm.
parodies of our world, which doesn't really appear in any other Games Workshop games. All the rest of them are quite siloed in their own lore and their own world. And Blood Bowl pokes a little bit of fun, and I love that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still love Blood Bowl. I'll always love Blood Bowl.
I'd love it. I can't play it anymore because I just have too much stress in my life that I can't. Yeah, I can't do it
I
anymore.
don't
But
like rolling ones. I'll make sure to eliminate that from Moonstone.
now let's talk about Moonstone. So where, I always try to dig into this. What sort of made you decide that you wanted to create a game, create Moonstone? Is this the first game you designed? Maybe give us a little bit of background about how you got to this point when, that you just said, "Hey, I want to create this awesome game called Moonstone."
I think one of the amazing things about tabletop games and tabletop hobby is it's a creative sandbox. Either it's the way you're composing an army or painting your army. Um, Unlike a computer game, there aren't really any boundaries. You can keep pushing it. You can create a new unit for your army, or you can create some custom scenarios, and there's absolutely nothing stopping you, which I love about tabletop games. And I'd always been interested in that kind of thing. I was always the one creating new, when I played Necromunda, I wrote the rules for our bites, and in our Blood Bowl campaign, I wrote some rules for like the end of season, with redrafting and stuff. Wait, it's there's published rules for it now, but I was writing rules for it when there weren't published rules. Oh, I don't know, 30 years ago, probably. And I started writing games just for me and my friends to play when we were teenagers.
Oh wow.
Um, I think by the time I wrote the rules for Moonstone, I'd probably maybe written half a dozen games, but never with any intention of publishing anything. It was always just, wouldn't it be cool if? And can I drag some people together and kit
Oh
bash
wow.
some models and give this a try and maybe play a couple of games and, not go through the full development process, but get something on the table and see if people like it. All sorts, card games, I had like an arena style deathmatch game, all sorts of things, but it was just for fun,
Hmm.
personal enjoyment. One of my friends at school, as we moved into our 20s, the guy who dragged me into Malifaux, actually, his name's Richie Pascal, um, kind of mentioned one time whilst we were playing Malifaux that he was working on a game of his own and was interested in playtesting and helping develop the game. That was kind of a sci-fi game, very kind of Necromunda, but yeah, in many ways, I think it was substantially better than Necromunda. But it was kind of that kind of um, cyberpunky
Mhm.
robots, hackers, small scale skirmish. And he'd got the kind of the bare bones of the mechanics, and he'd gone quite deep into the lore of this world that he created. And I suppose I stepped into the role of like lead developer because I kind of took his ideas and hammered it out and ended up writing the rule book. And we play tested together and it was great fun. But in the process of doing that, it kind of re-kickstarted my creative juices on game design again.
Hmm.
And where that game was kind of his creation, his world, his core mechanics, I was thinking, well, if it was my world, it would be a fairy tale world because that's the kind of aesthetic that I like the most. And if it was my mechanics, I would go for cards because I like the eight-player agency that you get when you've got a choice from a hand of cards. And if it was my game, and I started
Mhm.
thinking all these
Yeah.
kind of things. And one day I just, when you're trying to get to sleep and you can't sleep, and it's the best feeling ever because your brain is just absolutely alive with
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah.
It's the best feeling in the world. One day I just whipped out my phone and just made a million notes. The next morning, woke up, typed it all up, made some playtest materials, and within a week, I cobbled together some proxy miniatures from other miniatures range that I always liked, to be honest. That I just wanted to buy anyway, and had a kind of a prototype on the table, and you would recognize it very much as the Moonstone that's on sale now. There's a few things were tweaked and streamlined, and
Oh,
some
wow.
abilities were refined, and extra abilities were added, and power levels were adjusted. But the core game played very much as it does now, really. It was kind of just an absolute avalanche of
Hmm.
ideas that spilled out from decades of experience with other games. I like this bit from that game. I don't like this. I'm going to not do that, but I am going to. That bit's great. And I think one of the things which sort of really clicked for Moonstone is I do historical European martial arts, HEMA, competitive sword fighting,
Mm.
and I didn't like the melee mechanic at any game I'd ever played because it didn't feel anything like actually fighting with swords and spears and shields and things to me. Um, so I wanted to try this idea where there were basically six different combat moves, a rock, paper, scissors style of game where you can decide to play aggressively, but you're opening yourself up to counterattack.
Hmm.
And every move kind of covers you in one area, but not so well in another. And I like all kinds of games where there's secret information and just a whole load of things all came together in that kind of outburst of rules writing. And I didn't know how well it was going to go down, particularly the melee mechanic, because I thought there's nothing else like this that I'm
Yeah.
aware of.
Yeah.
Are people going to get it? Is it going to confuse people? But my friends that I was showing the game to were digging it, and I thought, you know what? I always kind of like the idea of being a games designer, and I'd even written a CV once that I was going to send off to games design companies. And obviously Kickstarter was a thing now, um, and I thought maybe I could actually launch this game and publish it on Kickstarter. Everyone who's playing it's enjoying it enough, and it's in a world setting that I'm passionate enough about. Maybe I can actually do this. So I did like a pilot Kickstarter just for one model, and then there was a stretch goal for one more model. It was the Fire Spitter, our goblin with the big barrel of oil on his back, and the little goblin running behind with the bellows pumping out the gasoline. Um, I did a mini Kickstarter just to kind of experience what it's like to do a Kickstarter and see a project through and source the suppliers and work with sculptors, and that turned out well. That covered its costs and delivered on time and all that. And I thought, yeah, I'll take the plunge. And when I look back, it was actually less than 6 months between getting the first game of Moonstone on the table and showing it to a friend and launching the Kickstarter for the full game. And I was amazed when I looked back and discovered it was such a short amount of time. Um,
Well, And there's so much to just pick apart. I'll even like mention the CV. I'll talk about that a little later. But one, I think that's super. So we actually do a segment now where we have Game Designer Corner, where we dig into the brains of game designers and find, okay, like how do you actually do this thing? And I think it's really cool that first of all, it sounds like for years you were just doing this for fun. You weren't, from what I understand you were saying, you weren't trying to make a career out of it. It's just like, hey, I want
No.
to design games, do this for fun. But it's all sort of building. It sounds like during this time up to Moonstone, there was all these things, and I'm sort of like that as a person. I'm a developer, but I'm also a creative myself. I went undergrad in design, and I'm the same way where like I get something in my head and it just sort of rolls around in the back of your head, and then eventually it just has to sort of come out. So that's really cool that is it's good to get that you can that is how it sort of came out. It's sort of built around years of sort of subconscious training. Would you just want to make sure that's sort of
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
And even when I did the Kickstarter and launched the game, I never thought that would be a career. I never thought it would be successful enough to sustain me instead of a regular day job. I guess like a lot of people, I've got a certain amount of creative energy, and if I don't, I'll never be bored because I'll just start a new project. And I stop new projects only when or every hour of my day is full up and I can't squeeze anything more in. And then I just build up more and more ideas for future projects that I'll do at some point in the future, whenever, mythically I get enough time to do them. But it makes me happy. I like a creative project, whether it's an artistic one or a games one, or even launching a company is a project that's sort of full of challenges which are enjoyable to overcome.
Yeah, let's talk about so Moonstone. So when I look at Moonstone, it's sort of the full package. Like, great design. So that's sort of
Thank you.
the book cover, right? We do judge books by their covers, and Moonstone has a great cover. But when you sort of open up Moonstone, I think the mechanics. I've kind of done some research after our expo, watched some gameplay, watched the mechanic. I like the mechanics. You're right. They feel intuitive, tactical depth, but simple. And I love those sorts of games that it's, great tactical depth while a level of simplicity. The lore is just, man, the lore is great. You would think it to be
Oh, thank
quirky,
you.
but it's also pretty dark at times. It feels, you know what? It reminds me of like Alice in Wonderland a little bit. It's sort of that just, yeah, it's sort of poking fun, but there is clearly some things that are pretty dark in it. I think you described it, labyrinth, I think. Anyway, I'm saying that, so okay,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on here. Did you design and develop this all yourself, or how do you sort of, where do you think your skills are? Where do you reach out to people? Yeah, how does all that work?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was obviously it was all me, but then I've picked up a lot of help along the way because it's resonated with people that have
Mhm.
joined in and helped and improved things. But it's interesting you mentioned the law. That's probably the one area where I've been least of a control freak, I suppose, and I've had a vision of a fairy tale world, a visual vision of this world and the kind of characters that are in it. Um, and I've sort of had an idea of the political structure and that there is a mystery. Um, and at the point of launching the game, it was still a mystery. I
Mhm.
started working initially with Richie and now with Susie to kind of go deeper and deeper and deeper into the lore, and it has developed organically, and I absolutely love where it is now. But you're right, there's dark undertones. It's got this kind of gentle, whimsical, comedic kind of surface layer. And the actual characters, the miniatures you're playing with, don't really have a clue what's going on, but there are some dark things happening
Mhm.
with these moonstones. The characters who are collecting them don't know why they're even collecting them. They're just, oh, get lots of money if I collect these moonstones.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, Susie's been brilliant. Me and Richie kind of just blurted out a lot of loose ends and wouldn't it be cool ifs? And then Susie's joined the team now, and she's managed to kind of weave it all together into like a really lovely tapestry that all makes perfect sense. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the one area of all the areas where I've allowed it to develop and take its own course and grow and mature, where the mechanics kind of clicked into place quite quickly. And obviously, the aesthetic style, I've got a kind of a blueprint in mind. I think I might have said this to you at UK Games Expo, but if a character wouldn't look out of place in the movie The Labyrinth,
Yeah.
then it
Yeah.
then it then it works for Moonstone.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a broad spectrum because
Yeah,
Labyrinth is
Moonstone, you mentioned
bad.
Dark Crystal. I think that Dark Crystal as well hits it on the head. Whimsical things, but clearly just this, but hits that balance. I think you're right. You mentioned Dark Crystal, Labyrinth. Let's talk about the lore. Again, we've talked about it, sort of a nice balance of whimsical and dark, but also sort of like a poetic feel. So, what were your inspirations behind the lore? You mentioned Labyrinth, Dark Crystal. Where else were you sort of pulling it? You mentioned Malifaux. Was that sort of where so sort of just open up on where you kind of where you sort of came up with this.
It's hard to say really because I think my starting point was visual. Um,
Hmm.
you mentioned Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. Both of those shared the same art director, which is Brian Froud. And unbeknownst to me, even though they were my favorite movies as kids, my favorite books were like the Pop-Up Goblins book and the Squashed Fairies book, which were also created by him. So,
Yeah.
at age 6, I was just binge watching The Labyrinth and looking through these art books, and later on got to know the work of Paul Bonner and Arthur Rackham and artists that were working in this uh, whimsical fairy tale style. Um, there wasn't many games that were there was Rackham Miniatures, which was obviously took its name from Arthur Rackham,
Hmm.
Confrontation, and then that went
Yeah.
bust. Um, a lot of the other games out there are kind of, Tolkien is amazing, and a lot of other branches in fantasy kind of took their lead from him. Games Workshop very much took their lead from him with the kind of characters and the very grim warlike worlds. And I wanted this kind of fairy tale world with meadows and sunshines and wells and village fates. Um, so it kind of started with that visual picture of this world, and the kind of characters that would inhabit it, rather than I know some game developers, Richie, for example, when I was working with him on his sci-fi game, that was lore first. He was
Yeah.
primarily interested in writing, less interested in the art style of the game. It kind of his kind of vision was for it to be miniatures agnostic because he had really clear ideas of the structure of this um, futuristic world. I didn't really. I kind of started with this
Yeah.
what would look beautiful, and then kind of okay, well, how do they get on? Do goblins and humans get on? Well, they get on okay. They don't really trust one another. But they would cohabit. They share a tavern together. That makes the world a more interesting place. It started like that from me, rather than reading another author or another game setting and thinking, oh, I want to build, reading an author's um, fantasy novel and thinking, oh, I want to set a game in a world like this. It wasn't really like that for me. It was looking at these amazing artists and their work and thinking,
Mhm.
what would the world that these characters are inhabiting be like? What would its political structure be like? And what would its, um, you
Hmm.
know, what do they eat? What do they drink? It kind of was a load of questions that started from a visual starting point. That
Yeah,
makes
and that's really cool to
sense.
get different perspectives on game design. I don't want to be a game designer, but I'm always fan. Well, I think everyone fancies themselves a game designer. I guess I do. But it's great to actually hear that visual people, like in other words, you approaching it completely different than what I hear a lot of people who do game design approach it from lore or they approach it from mechanics. Whereas you are very, you've got the theme and the theme is very concrete and you build it from there. Um, so let's keep on going. I'd love to talk all day, but we'll time box this. One thing I have to talk about here that just jumped out to me that I haven't heard anything is your approach to game balance. Now, one, it's really fascinating that when I think of Moonstone, it's a relatively new game, small game, I would think. And it's really fascinating that you are taking this approach to get that's very analytical, that's very like you're collecting data already, weekly tournaments I think you mentioned where you're
Yeah.
tracking statistics, and that from what you were telling me, even I think one of your people you work with was like a statistician, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, my lead developer. Yeah.
Lead developer. And it's funny, again, developers, us in statistics, we just really click.
Yeah, he loves it. That's a day off for him getting to browse through all of the stats and generate reports and things.
But that's great. So like you I love your quantitative approach to game design. A lot of game designers, I sometimes feel they think that they're so brilliant that they can make a balanced game and it just works. But you seem to take a different approach where you are, so yeah, you couldn't,
It always bothered me a lot when I played games that weren't balanced. I felt
hmm,
like it took the enjoyment of the experience away if you kind of, particularly if you spent a long time painting your models and you put them on the table and you think, oh, well, I'm not going to win. And even one of the things I wanted with Moonstone is that not only will you be able to bring any model and stand an equal chance of winning, or any faction, um, you you should feel like you're in with a chance of winning for the majority of the game as well.
hmm,
I don't like it when you have to play out an hour's gaming when you already know that you're
yeah.
so that was kind of a factor in the mechanics in the first place as well, to kind of make sure that the things which score you the most chance of victory are going to happen a little bit later in the game and you're never snuffed out. But yeah, there's a couple of reasons why Moonstone's so well balanced. One of them is that I really care about balance, and I don't release anything unless I'm sure that it's balanced. And me and Joe, so Joe Parsons is lead developer now, and he's his day job. He works 1 day a week for me, and the other 4 days a week he's a statistician for the National Health Service.
Mm,
Um,
great. Yeah.
so he's also one of these people that just understands numbers in a almost savant-like way. He just has an incredibly intuitive sense for probability. Most of us are comfortable with probability of dice. If I roll a d6, it's got a 1 in 6 chance of rolling a 6, etc. And we can extrapolate out to a bit more than that. But one of the things I wanted for Moonstone is not for a player to be able to theory craft it before the game
Yep.
starts. I don't want people to be able to calculate the success chance of this. There's a lot of simultaneous action by both players, so you can't predict with very much accuracy if something's going to succeed or fail. Somehow, though, despite the fact that the maths in Moonstone is incredibly complicated, and Joe has shown me some of his workings, and they're multiple pages in length,
And that's great.
um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
he can do
yeah,
it, which is
yeah.
really, really useful. As well as it's kind of intuitively knowing where the power levels are going to land. Both of us have, because I've probably played 1,000 games of Moonstone by now, and we've both got quite intuitive senses of these things. You can also kind of crank through the maths. So before we launch a character, it's usually on about version 20. Me and Joe have played it
Mm.
dozens of times. We've played hundreds of games each, so we're already quite confident in the power level before we publish it. And because we're a small company, we don't have investors. We're not pressured to get stuff out the door by particular release schedules. So we do release it when we're certain that it's balanced.
Mm.
But then we track the tournament records as well. Um, Joe attends quite a lot of them in person, and you can obviously
Oh
listen
wow, it's
to
great. Yeah.
table players and hear what they're talking about and see what list they're building, and we kind of have ideas of where we think the power level might be, but then obviously we've got the data to back it up. So it's kind of a multi-layered approach to getting the
Yeah.
balance
Yeah.
right.
And that's so great. I always say, like, I don't understand this thing. Maybe I can get your opinion on this real fast, just a hot take. But I don't, why play a game if there's not balance? Like, why not play an RPG? Why not take your army and just,
Yeah,
tell the story intuitive? If, we're playing a game and that, like,
I
and it,
agree.
yeah, like, why even play a game that's not balanced? It doesn't, to me, I just like do something else.
It always really annoyed me when things were imbalanced, and I wondered why other companies were having such a hard time of balancing, and I still wonder why. My only guess is that they are under pressure to release for certain deadlines and that they don't
Mm.
have the time to test. And doing a rata is very expensive and a big hassle as well. So I think maybe they'll kind of think, well, it's more profitable to move on to the next release or the next project rather than try and redress a balance issue that we've now discovered. Another thing
Yeah.
I'm hot on when it comes to balance is if you do feel like a faction or a character or anything is pulling ahead of the power curve, I'm a big fan of trying to fix it with the next release.
Yeah. That's right.
So you build in abilities to the new characters, which are particularly good against the characters which you feel are currently over the curve. Or if there's a character which is under the curve and you think they're not being picked enough, you build the next character with a synergy with it that gives it a
Oh,
new
that's a really
life.
cool idea. Yeah, so and I'll just say that like I love your approach, which is you can balance a game, and the fact that a small company like yours can, one, it raises the standard for everyone else, which is great, and two, you're speaking of a CV. I mean, like it's funny you didn't mention this, but I wanted to say like, can we get you working for other game companies? Like, but anyway, I won't pinch that, but like it was on my mind. I'll continue
I
on.
have been asked, but the thing is, there's about 20 of my own game ideas that I would love to be working on that I can't
It's
balance
probably
at the moment.
better that you stay on your own, honestly, because I think you probably get frustrated working for a bigger company because yeah, you're probably where you need to be. So one thing, sort of continuing on, one thing I love about your game, everything's free basically. Free PDF, free characters, cards. Now, of course, you can buy it. I think I'm going to be buying the cards and like I'm going to be building up. But I love that actually you can print everything and that you can play Moonstone for free. The PDFs are on your website, and that's awesome. Paper miniatures that look great, the cards, like, and that is so great that you just approach it from start the game for free, and then if you like it, come into it. Yeah, what? Yeah, I don't see a lot of people do that.
It's worked really well for us. I think the idea is the miniatures that we make are really lovely, and um, there's an awful lot of games that people can choose to try. And if we make it as easy for people as possible to try the game, and they enjoy the experience of playing the game, which I'm obviously confident in, then they'll want to they'll want to buy the miniatures because they're really nice miniatures. Um, if we maybe license a really expensive IP and our miniatures were mediocre, then you probably wouldn't want to do that because if you've licensed a really expensive IP and people are going to come flocking to it anyway because they're already into
Mm.
that brand. Um, Whereas because we're it's a world of our own creation, and we were a very small company in a very big world. Being able to say, here are the rules, they're available for free, just lowers that barrier to entry. And then people obviously, if they like it, they'll buy the miniatures. And then the way the miniatures are designed, you can kind of buy one more set and it unlocks a whole new strategy. Buy one more set and it unlocks a whole new strategy. Buy one more set and it unlocks a whole new strategy. So ultimately, we still make good income from the sale of miniatures. I don't think it harms us by giving the rules or even the paper standees away for free.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but
it's sort of like it's confidence in your game, saying you play this game, you're going to start buying into it, and I think that is a really good structure. Um, so we could go on and on. Like I said, I would. There are several things you say that I have to cut myself short because I know that you're busy. Um, anyway, but we'd love to know just a few short things. So one, what's your favorite piece of lore in a war game? Is there anything that just jumps out to you that's always in a
so
war game?
the,
Yeah.
the one that I'm really into at the moment, I don't know if you've heard of it, Turnip 28. It's
I've
not
heard of that.
new,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's I've heard it. Yeah.
It's it's hilarious.
Oh.
It's a very different, it's an alternate setting where Moonstone's fairy tale and pretty and whimsical and silly. Turnip's really grim, but it makes me laugh when I read their rule book. You know when we were talking about Blood Bowl earlier on with some of the Jim and
Mhm.
Bob sections and the crazy things the goblins are doing. I love a setting that doesn't take itself too seriously. And I
Yeah.
was reading a line in the book yesterday that made me laugh out loud. It was because in this world there are no animals. A sentient root vegetable has taken over the world
Yeah.
and taken over the minds of these pathetic inhabitants. There's some humans still alive, but they're all kind of addled with funguses and they're fighting on behalf of various root crops. It's mental. But there's one of the sergeants claims to have the last surviving animal, a worm, which looks suspiciously like his amputated leg, but he refuses to acknowledge that. And it's grim and funny and yeah, that's a
It
bit
is
of
Blood Bowl-esque. Yeah, very exactly where and it's funny, yeah, when you that sort of thing, when you said you're a fan of Blood Bowl, it and turn it to it just makes sense where your mind is at. That's awesome.
I think sadly I don't have much time to read. You mentioned you've got a family. I've got a young son as well, and obviously a full-time um, job running Goblin King games, and I don't. I tend to spend my time more, on visual things rather than reading, which is a real shame because I absolutely love reading. But when I'm retired, I'll do it then.
Yeah, I sneak in things with audiobooks, but yeah, I don't. I mean, there's so many. Like I've had to cut back on so much of novels and just movies and
Yeah.
games. Yeah, you have to pick you have to be very strategic.
Uh, Audiobooks is one way that I sneak it in actually, because I do drive in and out
Yeah.
of work. So I'm listening to A Court of Thorn and Roses at the moment, which is set in a fairy court,
Oh, that's
which is
cool.
excellent. I'm really enjoying that.
Oh
Yeah.
man. So tell us, we love to ask this to our guests. So we always ask, so if time and money were not a factor, you were what would be your dream wargaming experience? And we mean just again, you are just Bill Gates and you have all the time in the world. What's your dream wargaming experience?
So it's time is the key one, I think,
Yeah, all the
because
time in the world.
things that I would have said. One of the amazing perks actually of this career that I found myself in is I get to play on some of the most stunningly beautiful boards
Hmm.
that I've ever seen. That I own them now. They're here in this room. One of my employees, Mick Green, um, I got in contact with him because he builds boards, and I ended up hiring him now as our general manager. But about once a year, him and I get together and we build a new board to take to conventions. So you've probably seen the pirate board,
Hmm.
perhaps,
Yeah.
that we had on display, which is the one that we did this year. So playing on absolutely stunning terrain with studio painted models, perfection. I love that, and I get to kind of do that now as part of my line of work, which is fantastic. The other thing I really like to do, again, doesn't really require money. Um, there's uh, a get together called Gotham to Samaria, which I've attended a couple of times, where just a group of gamers hire out Element Games And the reason why it's my heaven is because everybody just turns up with a load of different games, and you can just stroll up to someone and say, "What's that game?" And they'll say, "It's such and such, Moonstone maybe." I was like, "Oh, I've never played it. Can you show me how to play?" And they'll go, "Yeah." And that's the whole premise of this get together. It's
Hmm.
3 days long. Everybody brings the games that they don't normally get a chance to play
Well,
because
that's great. Yeah.
they're, and people will teach you a series of new games that you've never played before, and it's just so nice. Everybody's really friendly, and I get to been maybe 3 times. I wish I could go more often, but scheduling. But every time I go, I maybe try out 4 or 5 new games I've never played before. And some of them I'll love and get into. That's how I discovered Turnip. For example, Turnip 28, for example, was up there. Um, Sometimes I'll be like, "Oh, I'm glad to have tried that, but it's not for me." But it's such a nice thing to do. It's like a festival where you just get to play like 3 new games. It's kind of like attending a convention in some ways, where you get demoed to, but nobody's trying to sell you anything, and
Yeah,
it's
it's
lovely.
not
And there's
that, and it's not
yeah,
that sort of energy that a convention.
oh,
Yeah, and I've went to a few of those when I was, single and familyless, and those were the best ones where, yeah, you just go and you can relax and you can just really play games.
and I just go with Tom Greenway. I don't go with any stock to sell.
Mhm.
If somebody asks for a demo of Moonstone, I will give them a demo of Moonstone. But I'm not going there to demo Moonstone or anything. I'm just going there to try out new games. And also, almost everybody there plays Moonstone, which is pretty cool because I can just kind of look around the room and be like, "Oh, there's 3 games of Moonstone going on at the moment," which is quite cool.
Yeah, yeah, and it's something that it was super cool that we have a group in Austin where I live that they actually play all sorts of games. It's sort of a, and I love that just checking around my group, I found a couple of Moonstone players that I can actually start playing and get this to the group. Um, well, man, it's so funny. I'm having to resist the urge to just ask you tons of questions, but we have the time boxes. So just, can you give us a little bit, tell us a little bit what you got planned in the future?
So, we are in the process at the moment of fulfilling a Kickstarter for our 4th faction. So Moonstone has 3 factions which are available at the moment. If someone wants to go to shop.moonstonethegame.com, you'd see it's divided into 3, um, which is our Commonwealth, which is humans and gnomes and giants, the Dominion, which is fairies and goblins and trolls generally, and Lashevolt, which is kind of this nature religion faction, which has got fauns and spirits and witches and cultists and things like that. We're launching our 4th faction, which is undead or fun dead.
Yeah.
Um, and so at the moment we're really busy shipping out parcels to the Kickstarter backers. Once that's over and done with, we'll do a retail launch of this new faction.
Mm.
So that's kind of the big project of this year. But obviously, in the background, we're also working on our next box sets, which won't go to Kickstarter. They'll just be direct to retail launches. So testing some new undead pirates at the moment, which will be cross faction between Dominion, that's already got pirates, and the Shades faction, the new faction, which has got undead.
Mhm.
We're testing some new fairies at the moment.
Oh, that's cool. I love the fairies
Fairy
in
box
your.
ranges. This is going to be like a melee focused fairy box set, which is quite cool.
That's what I'm actually interested in getting into is the fairy. I just think that they're a nice take on it. That sounds because I'm a big yeah. That sounds really kind of maneuverability and hand to hand close range.
Yeah,
Yeah,
tricks.
that's definitely my
If,
job. I'm an
if,
Eldar player in 40K, and so I love that sort of
they
maneuverability, hard
they've
hitting. Yeah.
they play really, really fun as well because obviously they've hardly got any wounds and they don't have much damage bonuses, so they don't have the normal ways that you would think that you would just bully your way through combat. But they've got loads of awesome movement tricks and shenanigans, basically.
Shenanigans.
Yeah.
Shenanigans. Very cool. Well, man. Well, Tom, thank you so much. And if anyone, like I said, we'll be posting the links. We'll also post the link to your Kickstarter. Moonstone, everyone, go check it out. Thank you so much, Tom.
My pleasure.
anytime.